Now, so we were in this early part of Surah 2, which I say is really, it really is the principal surah of the Quran, and it's a place where it should be at the beginning. But as you see, you know, to some extent he's following, I hate to say the Old Testament, I don't know what else to call it. Some people now call it the Hebrew Bible, but that seems a pretty sort of a clumsy way of putting it. He's following the, it's not just the Bible as such, Bible means book, as you know. He's following the Old Testament in its order of arrangement to some extent. You know, it's almost not a real commentary, but it shows he knows the Old Testament to some extent, or the angel does. Now, again, you folks who are believers in the room, I probably won't keep saying, or the angel does. You know, if you'll forgive me. Anyone feel that I must keep saying that? I don't want to offend your sensibilities. But to speak normally about a document and someone who's considered to have been the intermediary for its production, we usually attribute it to somebody, so I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you if we attribute it to him, okay? Would you allow me that? It's easier to keep on saying. I probably will still say it was an angel, but the point is that somebody knows, either him or the angel, the order of arrangement in the Old Testament. And he's following it, because you see, first it's Adam, which is the Adam and Eve story, and that's in the book of Genesis. And then he talks like in line 40, which is really interesting for those people who do scrolls in early Christianity. He says, "O children of Israel, remember the covenant and the favor I showed you, and fulfill your part. And I shall fulfill my part of the covenant." And then it says, "And fear me, and fear me." Now, I don't know if I have a proper translation here. If someone has a different translation there for line 40, "and fear me." Mr. Paris knows how important the idea of fearing God is in this period that I've been talking about. And what's that the basis of, Mr. Paris? Do you recall what phraseology fearing God is the basis of? The phraseology we get in early Christianity, God-fearers. A God-fearer is someone who fears God. And God-fearers was the category that we placed intermediate people in this movement from classical, whatever that was, Judaism, into early Christianity. The God-fearers were a category of associated members to the community of the Torah of Moses, if you want to call it that, who were attached to the synagogues around the Mediterranean, and though they hadn't completely come into the covenant yet, they were considered to be God-fearers. And that was based on this idea of fearing God. It's in, I think, Deuteronomy, but it's also in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's very strong in the Dead Sea Scrolls. In any event, these God-fearers were an associated status in the synagogues around the Mediterranean in Paul's time. And so when you look at the book of Acts, you find that he's talking, and he's mostly addressing his message to these God-fearers, because he wants to cut these God-fearers who are interested in Judaism or the Mosaic covenant or whatever, but have not yet come in under full status. That is, they haven't adopted the whole of the Mosaic law. They're in an associated status. They fear God, but they're not willing to carry out yet all the aspects of the law as what that entails. And so they were called God-fearers. And then that's what's talking about the scrolls in this book I'm doing. We emphasize very much that in the Dead Sea Scrolls there is a category of God-fearers quite clearly. That is non-Jews, what you would call Christians now, because all so-called Gentiles in the Western world have become Christian, except the ones in the Muslim world have become Muslim. But in any case, all these are derivative religions from this period. Christianity and I think Islam, frankly, come out of things that were done in the period which we're talking about. And Muhammad again here shows himself, or the angel, to be aware of what a God-fear would be. And I can pick up on that because I know what fearing God means. So all I have to do is the document Al's been working on, the Damascus document it's called, which has to do with the covenant in the land of Damascus, which is the rededicating oneself to the original covenant, but out in the Syrian desert someplace. It's directed as well, or in large part, to those who fear God. So it's exactly the same as he has here, fear me, those who fear God. So I can pick out a word that, which to the believer, you say, well, how can you help us as a Muslim understand our text? You're not a Muslim. Yeah, I know, I'm not. But I can see things in it that you wouldn't be aware of. That's how I can help you. Your imams, your mosques, they can help you practice, but they can't see the things that someone who has looked into the whole background of all of these religious cultures can find. And of course, fearing God is something that just jumps right out of the page at me. Just hits me right between the eyes. And believe in that which I reveal, and so on, line 41. And keep would jump right out at me too. Keep your duty unto me. In the scrolls, it's keep the covenant. Be a keeper. In the letter of James, not a breaker. I mean, I can just pull these words right out of here, of the tradition into which this is being, I don't want to say plugged, but in the tradition this is finding itself with it. And there's a truth with lying, 42. Don't confound truth with lying. The enemy in the Dead Sea Scrolls is called the liar, the spouter of lying. And the teacher is called the teacher of righteousness. And so you're always getting the contrast of truth with lying. And in Paul's letters, you constantly get on to the fact that he's very sensitive to the fact that people are accusing him of being a liar. And so he constantly punctuates his statements with, and I do not lie. And what I say is true, and I do not lie, because he's aware people think he's a liar. I think he's a liar, but it doesn't matter what I think. His enemies at that time thought he was a liar. And what they're lying about is the visions that he claims to be having. I mean, that's what the accusation of lying is about, that he claims to be in direct touch with Christ Jesus in heaven. I think Muhammad will have the same trouble in Medina with stubborn previous tradition people, as I told you about. So there'll be these accusations, I'm sure, and therefore he also then throws them back. Do not confound truth with lying. And that's in the scrolls, it's in early Christianity, it's in the letter of James, it's in the Pauline Corpus, and here it is in the Quran too. And of course, establish worship, pay the poor due, bow your heads with those who worship. Those are now capsule descriptions of Islam that we'll see repeated periodically, maybe 5 or 10 times, even in the material that we will look at. And out of those, we'll be able to get what are called the 5 pillars of Islam.